looky what I got. It's the Retroid Pocket 3. It's supposed to be pretty amazing. It runs Android, it plays all your old retro games, and it supposedly can handle all of the newer retro systems like Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, even PSP, and some GameCube and PS2. All on a great little Android device with a big beautiful screen that cost only $130. Could this really be true? Well, I'm not going to tell you the answer to that in the first 10 seconds, otherwise you won't watch the rest of the video. Roll the intro! Hi there, how you doing? I'm TechDweeb, welcome, thanks for clicking on the video. I have a problem, you guys. I'm an addict. I'm addicted to root beer and GPUs and also retro gaming handhelds. And that's the addiction we're gonna address today. Seriously, why do I keep buying these? I have so many already, and they just keep coming out with shiny new ones, and the new ones are usually slightly better. Heck, even if they're not, I just end up buying the new ones and forgetting the old ones, and it's an endless cycle of retro games, and fun, and shame, and poverty. But hey, if I grew some common sense and stopped buying them, then you'd be missing out on some great new TechDweeb videos when I get the latest toys, so you know, I kinda need to keep fueling my addiction or else I'd let you down. Please don't correct me if that's not true. I don't even want to know. Speaking of wasting my money on the latest and greatest tech gadgets, this is the Retroid Pocket 3. It's an update to the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus, which is a great device that I made a big log video on. But this is the new version, and it is definitely an upgrade from the old version. Like, a lot. I know a lot of reviewers say it isn't much different, but trust me, they're wrong. It is. I've been playing with it for a week now, and I've got to know it very well. And I'm really excited to show it to you. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Let's start with an unboxing. You like unboxings, don't you? Yeah, you do. Well, I already unboxed it, obviously, so let's go back in time. Upon arrival, the box itself proudly announced that the contents were made in China, as all the best stuff is. Opening the box, I was greeted with a bunch of stuff. It came with some screwdrivers and a guitar pick, and some PCBs and replacement buttons. Later I found out that these are for replacing the dome-style buttons with membrane-style buttons. Spoiler alert, I didn't bother with this crap. It also came with a cheap Chinese SanDisk microSD card, 32 gigabytes. I also didn't realize I was getting this, and I didn't use it because I already had a 128 gigabyte card locked and loaded. So a bunch of stuff that I didn't want or need, but surely made the whole thing more expensive. Alrighty. The box of the device itself is very nice. It feels very premium. So if you like nice boxes, then this is definitely the handheld you want to get. Inside the box is a piece of plastic with the Retroid Pocket 3 in it. I'll get to that in a minute. First, let's check out the manual. All the different things, really useful word paper there. It's a really nice USB-C cord, considering this is a pretty cheap device. On to the device itself. In the bag, there's a screen protector, which I'll put on later. And what's this? Can you guys see that? I don't think you can see it well on the camera, but there's this blob of like goo on the front. It's not sticky, it's greasy. And getting it off was actually kind of a pain in the butt. It didn't wipe off right away. I actually had to scrub and wipe for a few minutes to get it all off. I think there was some of this stuff on the sleeve of the screen protector, and since they shoved that right in with the device, it smudged up all over the front of my Retroid Pocket 3. Not a very nice welcome, but I did get it all off eventually. Turning it on was the typical Retroid setup process. You choose which pre-installed apps you want pre-installed for you, and then you choose your default launcher, and then you're into the device and ready to start configuring it and adding your ROMs and stuff. And, well, that's the end of the unboxing experience, I guess. And now we're back to the present. Good job with the unboxing, young TechDweeb, but why don't you leave the rest to me? You go do whatever you want to do. Except be careful and don't die, or else I'll cease to exist. So let me give you the grand tour. Here's the device itself. The first thing I noticed was how round it is. Look at this. Compared to the sharp edges of the original RP2 Plus, this device feels like it doesn't have a single sharp edge at all. It's perfectly round on all the edges. I guess it's like aerodynamic or something. I actually prefer the look of the original sharp edges. I think it had a nice unique aesthetic to it. With the round edges, this new version, it just feels more generic. I always find it a bit of a bummer whenever a device that has a unique design that I like gets an update and it loses some of its previous charm. It happens way too often. Also, I admit that this is a personal preference thing, but I really prefer the color on my old RP2 Plus, that yellowish orange. I love that color. I figured since I was getting a new device, I should try a different color scheme. I thought maybe this one would match my Miu Mini or something with the old Game Boy colors, but I didn't really like the color of this gray plastic. It's just boring. It just doesn't really impress me the way the original RP2 Plus did. Maybe if I chose a different color, I'd feel different. Although, even the photos of the newer yellow one, they don't catch my eye the same way the RP2 Plus did. That's my only complaint, really, about the look and feel. Compared to the Retroid Pocket 2, it's substantially longer, but it's actually more pocketable for several reasons. So I think this one actually feels more portable. It's got a great weight and balance. It really feels like a premium device. Let's do a quick tour here. On the bottom, we have our SD card slot, which is now covered by a hardshell plastic cover, a USB-C port for charging and connecting USB devices, and we have our headphone jack. On the left side, we have our volume keys, volume up and down. On the right side, we have our, wait a sec, what even is this button? Oh my god, it's a home button? This is embarrassing. I've been using this thing for days, and I didn't even realize there was a home button. I just used the standard Android touchscreen gestures to get home. But I guess I'll start pushing a button instead. On the top, we have a power button, and on the other side, this is a bit weird. We have our start and select buttons up here. I watched a few reviews of the RP3, and pretty much everyone complained about these. I guess I'm a weirdo, but they feel good to be up there. Having them out of the way and able to access them with my finger reached around the device rather than needing to use my thumbs on the front, I think it's great. I acknowledge that I'm in the minority though, because most reviews of this thing, everybody complained about that for reasons I don't fully understand. Alrighty, on to the controls. First, the thumbsticks. On the original RP2 Plus, there was a joystick and a slider. And again, I had a different opinion on those from most of the reviewers because I actually wish that I could have had both sides be a slider. Because I like the lower profile nature of the slider, and it would have been much more pocket friendly. Well, I have no complaints here, because the joysticks they've used are actually quite low profile. They're recessed so much that they're barely any higher than the actual buttons. They feel really good to me, and the sticks themselves feel great. They're nice and springy, and now they have L3 and R3, and the click feels good. The D-pad is nice, the buttons are nice. I'm no expert or anything, but I have no complaints. But here's the thing about the buttons and the D-pad. The device ships with what are called domed switches, which are kinda clicky. However, the company also included an entire conversion kit to change the buttons and D-pad into conductive rubber membrane style. Alright, that's cool, I guess, but let's be real here. Will most people bother? I'm a TechDweeb, and I'm not even gonna bother. So like, why'd they even include this crap anyways? They could've just left this stuff out and made it cheaper. Or they could just sold it as an add-on. If you have to completely disassemble the device and replace all these components, then is it really worth including all this stuff by default when I guarantee that 99% of the users will just stick with the default? The buttons are fine the way they are. They're great, actually. I like them a lot. I also like the bumpers and the triggers. They have the same sort of slightly mushy click that the buttons do. Well, like I said, I'm not picky with this sort of thing. For me, if it works and it's not unpleasant to the point where I notice it, then it's good enough for me. Before we fire it up, let's talk about the price and the specs. Here they are. Did you catch that? No? Here they are again. There are two models, $120 for the 2GB version and $130 for the 3GB version. It only has 32GB of internal storage, and you can use an SD card to give yourself extra storage for your ROMs and stuff, which is what I did. I have a 128GB micro SD card for my ROMs, but I really would have preferred 64GB of internal storage, because 32GB can fill up pretty quick, even by just installing your emulators in a handful of native Android games. It uses the same processor as the RP2 Plus, but now you have the option of going with 2 or 3GB of RAM instead of just 2. So this one that I have is the 3GB version, and it now uses Android 11 instead of 9. So the performance will be similar to the old RP2 Plus, but it should be a little bit better because of that extra RAM and the newer Android version. The developers are saying we'll get 20 to 30% more performance, but I'm highly skeptical of that. Alright, let's fire it up and see for ourselves. When you power it on, you'll get a little intro animation and music. Which I freaking hate. You can't turn this off, it just plays at full volume and you can't disable it. Why would they do that? Alright, here we are all powered up. The screen is freaking beautiful. The screen on the older RP2 Plus wasn't great. It was serviceable, it got the job done, but it definitely didn't feel super premium or anything. This new one is miles ahead. It's a 4.7-inch IPS laminated touchscreen with a resolution of 1334 by 750. So that's nearly double the resolution of the RP2 Plus, which means we should get some much better integer scaling on our older retro systems. It also has great viewing angles. It's very bright, so you'll have no problems playing this in the daylight. And at very low levels, the screen is nice and dim, with no flickering issues at all, and the screen itself looks crystal clear, no matter the brightness. Also, compared to the RP2 Plus, this new screen has way more dynamic range, and the colors are much more saturated. It's just an overall amazing screen. Probably the best part about this device, actually, and for this reason alone, I'm super glad I got the upgrade. As for the sound, well, first, we have downward back-facing speakers, which is freaking annoying. Like, come on, why do we still have devices that do this? Just make the speakers face the user of the device. Is that so hard? The speakers themselves sound, okay. Here's what they sound like compared to my cell phone. I don't know if it's coming across in the video, but my phone sounds way better. The speakers in the RP3 don't have much bass, so they're a little tinny, but honestly, they're fine. They get the job done. Before we get to the gameplay, I need to talk about the bundled software that comes with the device. This device, like the RP2 Plus, comes with a bunch of software, and the primary piece of software is the Retroid launcher. I had a ton of problems with this on the RP2 Plus, but most of that is fixed here, which is nice. It's easy to use. I'm not going to show you how to set it up because there's already a bunch of videos on YouTube if you need help, but honestly, it's not hard. You can easily figure it out. It automatically creates your ROM folders on your SD card so you can add your ROMs, and it's easy to scan it for ROMs, and it automatically downloads the box art, and you can use it to launch RetroArch and automatically download the cores that you need, and it's pretty easy and it works good. However, I don't like it for a few reasons. I'm not going to go into detail, but long story short, the Retroid launcher doesn't play nice with my other preferred Android launcher, which is the Nova launcher. And the game art scraping is okay, but not great. It misses lots of games, and it cuts off the box titles because it crops them into a square shape. But my biggest complaint is that you can't view game screenshots, just the box covers. So for those reasons, I chose to go with Dig instead. I just love Dig. It's just as easy to use, and it also automatically scrapes all your box art and screenshots. And the best part about it is that you can browse your library as screenshots, which I think is way more useful than browsing box covers, which don't freaking tell you anything about the actual games, as we all know very well. I made a video guide of how to set up Dig. If you'd like to get this set up yourself, that should help you out. And the good news is you don't have to decide between them. The Retroid launcher and Dig, you can actually use both, go back and forth between them. I personally love Dig, but the Retroid launcher is alright, to be honest. I'm not here to convince you to go either way, I just wanted to show you what I did and what I prefer. Oh my gosh, the video's been going on so long and I haven't even showed any games yet. I am terrible at my job. I'm sorry, buddy. Let's not waste any more of your time here. Now that we're done the unboxing, and we checked out the hardware and the launcher, it's time to play some games. Right after this word from our sponsor. World of War Tanks is a free-to-play. Kidding, I'm kidding. Here's some games for you. Obviously, the old stuff is gonna run perfectly. All your old Atari and NES and Game Boy, all that stuff. They look amazing on this screen, but as you can see, it does add some pretty substantial black bars to the sides of the screen. For older games, the screen ratio on the RP2 Plus made a lot more sense, since most of the old systems were closer to that 4:3 aspect ratio. But with the widescreen, we have more options, because there are several ways that we can make use of that widescreen. And it's freaking luxurious when we do. I'll show you that in a little bit though. So yeah, for the older stuff, you'll have to live with some black bars, but the device isn't a honking huge device or anything, so it doesn't feel terrible to play, even Game Boy games on this screen with the bars. I'd probably play those on a different device though. So, see, that's the thing with these devices. There's no one perfect device. A perfect Game Boy device won't be a perfect PSP device, for example. So if I'm playing Game Boy games, I'm probably going to use my BU MIDI because it's a more authentic Game Boy experience. That said, I really enjoy playing Game Boy Advance games on this big, beautiful screen. There isn't much by way of black bars, and I like to give it a slight stretch so that it's running at 16:10, and it nearly fills the screen like this without much distortion at all. The Game Boy Advance is such a beautiful retro system. I've said it many times, but I'll say it again here, why not? The Game Boy Advance is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the retro gaming era, but it was a much more recent system than most of the older Pixel systems, so the games themselves are built with much more modern game design sensibilities and more sophisticated game mechanics. Some of my favorite retro games are Game Boy Advance games, and there are a ton of amazing GBA games. And of course, all the other 8-bit or 16-bit or 32-bit retro stuff you want to run works flawlessly. All your Nintendos and Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, TurboGrafx 16, arcade systems like MAME, Final Burn Alpha, Neo Geo, you won't have a single issue with any of that stuff. Actually, speaking of arcade games, they are flippin' luxurious to play on this device. There's just something about arcade games. They had such colorful art, and the music and sound effects were loud and bombastic. They're such a feast for the senses, and they're amazing to play on this thing. And for vertical shmup fans, it's simple to rotate the screen and swap the controls around in RetroArch, so you can play with the screen on its side in Tate mode, the way it should be. I love me some vertical shmups, and this is hands down my favorite device to play them on. No competition. Let's move on to the 3D stuff, because this isn't a low-end device. It's a higher-end device, and it can handle some stuff, if you know what I mean. And by stuff, I mean 3D retro emulation. Let's start with the lower-end 3D stuff, like PlayStation, Nintendo 64, Sega Saturn, and there's not really much to say about them. They run amazing. This device has basically a 720p screen, and you can run these all upscaled to 720p, with a few exceptions. Some Sega Saturn games did require frame skip when they were ran at 720p. Nintendo 64 ran mostly okay, but there was a little bit of slowdown, so I had to tweak the shader settings, and then it was fine. And PlayStation 1 ran perfectly when it was upscaled. Literally problem-free. So if you like to upscale your old 3D systems, you can go nuts. But to be honest, with these older 3D systems, I actually like to play them at their native resolution. There's just something much more authentic feeling about seeing these early 3D graphics in their original low-res glory. It's kind of just the way they were designed to be seen. And I'm kind of fascinated by early 3D technology, so I like to play them as they were originally intended, right down to every last big chunky pixel. Oh, and also Nintendo DS. You can play original DS games on this, and they work great. I like to have the dual screen hybrid layout with one screen big and the other small, and you can switch between them using the trigger, so that it's easy to push buttons on the lower screen if you need to. It works really good. The original DS had lots of great games, and this is a very enjoyable way to experience them. The 3DS doesn't work at all, to be honest. None of the games I tested had even close to playable frame rates. Maybe there are a handful of super easy to run 3DS games that'll run here, but I didn't bother finding any. I have a modded 3DS, so I could just play everything I want there. And now, on to my favorite system to emulate on this device. I think for all these retro emulation toys, each device has the one thing that it does best. I love playing Gameboy Advance games on my Pal Kitty V90. I love playing PS1 games on my Super Console X. I love playing original Game Boy games on my Miu Mini. And I love playing Nintendo 64 games on my RP2+. When I was considering getting this device, I really didn't know if I'd love it. What would be that one system that suits this device perfectly and is a ton of fun to play? But I totally found it, and I freaking love it for this one reason. This device is a PSP. It really is. I've had a ton of fun playing PSP games on it. The RP2+ did play PSP, but that smaller screen has nothing on this new big and beautiful widescreen. I mean, just look at this. PSP is such an amazing experience on this, which is a big surprise, because I was expecting it to be not so great. And the reason for that is that I watched a Retro Game Corp's review, and he was kind of hard on the RP3 with regard to the PSP.
But I would say there are going to be some drawbacks. Number one is the vast majority of the games are only going to play at full speed if you use a 1x resolution.
You know, I love Russ's channel. He does great things for the retro handle community by making guides and stuff, but you know what? I'm doing it. I'm calling you out, Russ. You said that the vast majority of PSP games only run at 1x resolution, but I was able to get the vast majority of the games running at 2x resolution at full speed, and all it took was a little bit of tinkering with the settings. In fact, every single game I tried worked great at 2x resolution, but each one did need a custom settings config. Now, it's not hard to go through the settings. There's like 10 settings that impact performance, and usually it's just a matter of toggling them on and off and finding the right combination of engine and buffer effects and clock speeds. And even with God of War, that super hard to run game that everyone loves to point at and say, oh, look how bad the PSP performance is, even though it's the only freaking game that performs this bad. And does anyone even play this game, for crying out loud? Even that game does work fine on the Retroid Pocket 3 at 2x resolution, as long as you use a cheat code to lock the FPS to 30 FPS. And it really isn't hard to do. So I guess that maybe Russ wanted a perfect out-of-the-box experience without having to tinker with settings or whatever. And he didn't get that, so he was kind of hard on the PSP on this device because of that. But I'm here to tell you that this is an amazing PSP device. Seriously, it runs everything nearly flawlessly. Maybe the occasional stutter at 2x resolution, but honestly, barely at all. It's like 99.9% perfect. I am so enamored with PSP on this thing that I'm planning to do a separate video just on the PSP, because all the other reviewers are giving it a hard time, and they're not really giving you the whole picture. And because, like I said, there are some settings that you'll need to tweak, and I think I can help you out if you're having issues. And also, I just want to show you how amazing PSP is on this thing, because it really is. So get subscribed so you don't miss that video that's coming up soon. The PSP was a great system. And yeah, you can emulate PSP on other devices, but not on a device this cheap. And with great controls and thumbsticks and the beautiful screen, upscaled to 2x resolution, this is a PSP lover's dream come true. And as for the other 3D systems, the harder to run stuff like Dreamcast, PS2, and GameCube, yeah, this will be very hit or miss. Most of the Dreamcast runs fine, without issue. As for PS2 and GameCube, some stuff runs great, other stuff runs okay if you lower the resolution, and it is somewhat playable, and some stuff is just terrible and isn't playable at all. That said, I was impressed when I found several games that worked really good. And there are actually lots of great games on these systems that do work decently on the RP3. There's a community document that logs all the best settings to use for these hard to emulate 3D systems. I'll link to that in the description below. So hey, if you like to tinker and tweak with settings to try and get games playable, which I do, I like to tinker. So if you're like me, then you'll probably have some fun playing around with GameCube and PS2 on this thing. Just don't expect most games to run problem free, because most won't, but some will, and that's pretty cool. Look, I know this video is going on a long time, and I'm sorry for that I can't be more succinct, but there's a few more important things that I need to show you. One of them is native Android gaming. And, well, it's an Android, and it runs Android 11, so you should be able to at least install the games you want to play. I don't think you're going to have an amazing experience for the more demanding games, like Genshin Impact or Fortnite or whatever the kids are playing these days. I'm not going to bother doing an extended Android gaming test on this thing, but I will say the few games I tried did run well. And they looked awesome on this bright, beautiful IPS screen. And of course, it's a touchscreen, so you can play touch games, or MOBA games where you use a controller for your left hand and touchscreen for your right hand. And the RP3 has a built-in screen mapper. So if a game doesn't support controllers, or doesn't support the Retroid Pocket 3 controllers, you can just map the buttons and the joysticks on the device to areas of the screen. And it works good. Not every game will be able to be controlled like this, but most will work fine. Other than that, I mean, it's an Android device, so you can do Android stuff. Not much more to say about that, so moving along. Local game streaming also works flawlessly. Using Moonlight, you can stream games locally over your home network from your PC. Yeah, you could do this before on the older RP2 Plus, but this has a big, beautiful widescreen display, and your PC games will look freaking awesome on it. That's one thing that held us back before on the RP2 Plus. When I tried to play PC games via streaming, it did work, and it was fun to try, but I could barely read the text. On a game like The Witcher 3, it was actually impossible to play on the RP2 Plus. But on the RP3, all the text is very readable, and the game is very enjoyable to play. Oh, and now we have L3 and R3 clicks on the joysticks. That was always annoying before when a game like The Witcher required thumbsticks to call your horse. You couldn't do it before, and now you can. So that's cool. Also, look at this. You can stream your high-end emulators from your PC. You can use the Dolphin emulator on the PC to stream your GameCube or Wii games. You can use Cemu GPU to stream Wii U games and play some Breath of the Wild with enhanced graphics and shaders. And with the Yuzu emulator, this thing can become that other portable console that everyone's playing these days that I'm not allowed to say the name of. If you're like me and you're 40 and you live at home in your mom's basement and barely leave the house, this is perfect because your gaming PC can emulate lots of high-end stuff and you can just stream it to your RP3 and play everything perfectly while you're sitting on your couch beside your mom as she knits you some socks and tells you how much she loves you and how much better you are than her friends' kids. Online game streaming probably works fine. I can't test it because my internet sucks. That's all I can say on that topic. Here's another feature I love. I made an entire video about this topic on the RP2 Plus, and the principles apply here, so I'm not going to go into the crazy detail. But long story short, you can also use this device as a portable home console. If you get some Bluetooth controllers, you can connect them all up to this thing and plug it into your TV, and boom, you got yourself a retro gaming emulation console for your home theater. Just like a Super Console X or a Raspberry Pi or whatever. There's a micro HDMI port on the top and you just plug in the micro HDMI dongle, connect up your Bluetooth controllers, and you're good to go. Check out my other video on this topic if you want to know more about it. It's a pretty cool feature, and I'm surprised there aren't more people talking about it. It probably goes without saying, but I'm gonna say it anyways, because some people skip right to the end of the video to hear the conclusion, if you can believe that. Hey, they're lost though, missing out on all my great, insightful comments and funny jokes. What I wanted to say is that I flippin' love this thing. It's a huge improvement over the RP2 Plus. I don't think it's 20 to 30% better performance like the developers say, but it's a bit better, which is cool. The main reason it's a huge improvement is that huge, big, beautiful screen. Compared to the RP2 Plus with its smaller, less than stellar screen, it's a night and day difference. The device itself is a solid build, if a bit boring. The controls are nice, they work well. The low-profile thumbsticks are surprisingly comfortable and actually quite pocket-friendly. Oh, and I didn't even mention, but the battery is great. I didn't do any benchmark tests on the battery life or anything, but I've been impressed at the end of the day, after a bunch of playing, that I still have a decent amount of charge left, especially considering the big bright screen. The bundled software is okay. It's improved since the RP2 Plus, I'll give it that, but I still don't love it, and I prefer to use my own emulation front end. But that's actually another great thing about this device. It's Android, so you can customize it, download your different apps or emulators, change the launcher, the front end, really just do whatever you want. Or just stick with the default stuff if that's your jam. It's got the guts to handle the older 3D systems like Sega Saturn, PS1, Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, Nintendo DS, but where it really shines is the performance in PSP. This thing is a PSP. It's like perfect playing PSP on this device. With some settings tweaks, you can upscale your PSP games to play at 2x resolution with solid frame rates, and they look amazing on this screen. And they play great on these controls. And it's just such a delight to be able to play the entire PSP library without problems. I'm working on a guide for running PSP on this thing, how to set the best global settings and tweak the game-specific configs to get everything running flawlessly at 2x resolution. So get subscribed so you don't miss that. As for the other 3D stuff like GameCube and PS2, yeah, it's a bit hit or miss. Some games run good, some run just okay, some don't run at all. But enough of them run okay that it's worth not discounting those higher-end 3D systems entirely. And of course, you can do native Android games, or use it as a home console, or stream your games. It really is an amazing device that you get for the price. This thing is $120 for the 2GB version, and $130 for the 3GB version. I don't know how much of a difference that extra gigabyte of RAM makes, but the way I see it, if you're getting this for higher-end emulation or Android gaming, then go for that extra gigabyte. But if you're getting it for more retro stuff and you don't care about the higher end 3D stuff very much, then you'll be fine with the 2GB model. Honestly, I can't say enough good stuff about this device. It really is awesome. In the future, I hope we get an RP3 Plus with maybe an upgraded processor so we can finally do some better high-end emulation. Maybe a bit more internal storage would be nice. But even as it is now, it's so great that I give it my highest score. 16 dweebs out of 17. With a bonus TechDweeb Golden Can of Root Beer because of its stellar PSP performance, and a certificate of retro gaming perfection awarded by Shigeru Miyamoto himself. And that brings us to the end. I'd love to know your thoughts on the Retroid Pocket 3. Does it meet your expectations? Do you think it's good for the price? Does this sort of wider device with a widescreen appeal to you? Do you like Oreos and root beer? Please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you down there. And while you're down there, click the thumbs up button if you liked the video, or the thumbs down button if you didn't. Subscribe if you haven't already, so you don't miss any of my videos. Consider becoming a channel member if you want to support the things that I do and get some fun perks at the same time. And as always, I'm TechDweeb. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.